Imagine you're holding a document that operates as this high-level business manual, a wilderness survival guide, and like a masterclass in behavioral psychology all rolled into one.
Right?
And you start reading it, and the frameworks for compounding wealth or spotting misinformation and even guarding your mental health are just so sharp, you'd assume this thing was published by some modern think tank, just last week.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But if you were to actually look at the physical artifact, it's carved into the stone railings of a relic shrine from the 3rd century BC.
Which is just wild.
It really is. It completely fractures our whole timeline of human insight. I mean, we tend to assume that cognitive behavioral principles or, venture capital strategies are relatively recent inventions.
Right, like we just came up with them. And that is exactly why today's deep dive into our source material is so compelling. We are looking at excerpts from the Jataka Tales, specifically the first book, which is known as the Ikanipata. For those who aren't familiar, these are ancient Buddhist birth stories that detail the previous lives of the Buddha, known as the Bodhisatta. And throughout these texts, he shows up in all sorts of different forms. I mean, he's a wise merchant, a golden deer, a tree fairy, you name it.
Yeah, and our goal today isn't just to do some, dry historical survey of ancient mythology.
Right, no dusty textbooks here.
Exactly. We really want to extract the underlying mechanisms of these fables. Like, how did people over 2 millennia ago encode such practical strategies for navigating illusions, building leverage from zero, and protecting our mental environment?
Well, let's start with the format itself, right? Because the sources describe how these tales were actually used. They weren't just these scrolls read in total silence in a library. Wandering teachers were actively performing them.
Yeah, they were a highly practical teaching tool. The text actually notes that these wandering teachers would use these fables to enliven their religious discourses. I mean, they needed to keep their audiences awake.
Nobody wants a sleeping audience.
Right, so the structure of every single Jataka is deliberately engineered for engagement. Each one begins with a story of the present.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
So this is a real-world dilemma that the Buddha is dealing with in his current life. It could be a backsliding student, a greedy merchant, or just someone losing their way.
Got it. So it's the relatable hook.
Precisely. And once that real-world problem is established, the Buddha transitions into a story of the past. He recounts a previous existence to solve that specific dilemma.
I mean, that's essentially the blueprint for a modern, impactful public presentation like a TED Talk.
It really is.
You don't just dump abstract philosophy on a tired audience. You pivot to a surprising narrative or a case study, a talking animal or a high-stakes adventure, and you let the audience discover the lesson alongside the characters. It kind of shows that human psychology hasn't really shifted much, has it?
Not at all.
Narrative is just infinitely stickier than abstract truth.
And the sources are very self-aware about this, too. They explicitly mention illustrating doctrines by appropriate, memorable examples. I mean, when you encode a philosophical lesson in a story about a high-stakes desert crossing, it lodges in the listener's memory. They can actually carry it with them into their own challenges.
Well, let's see that stickiness in action with a literal survival scenario from the sources. We should look at the Apanka Jataka, which is actually the very first story in the text. This one reads like an absolute masterclass in surviving manipulated information.
Oh, it's a brilliant story. It's about 2 merchants, and they're each leading this massive caravan of 500 carts across a deadly 60-league desert.
And they can't travel together, right?
Right, because the resources on the route are just too scarce, so one of them has to go first.
So the foolish merchant decides to go first. He assumes, he'll get the untouched grass and the cleanest water for his oxen. He loads up his carts with all these heavy water jars and just heads out. But right in the middle of this blistering desert, he runs into a water goblin. And the imagery the ancient writers use here is just incredibly specific.
It's very vivid.
Yeah, it's not just a shimmering mirage. The goblin rides up in a carriage with muddy wheels. His attendants are dripping with water. Their clothes are soaking wet. They're wearing wreaths of white water lilies, and they're chewing on juicy lotus stalks.
Which is just a highly calculated sensory manipulation. I mean, the goblin is targeting the exhausted merchant's deepest desire. He tells the merchant, why are you lugging all those heavy water jars? Just a little further ahead, it's raining constantly, there are lakes everywhere.
So the foolish merchant completely falls for it. He dumps all his life-saving water just to lighten his load, and of course there is no rain ahead.
None at all.
His caravan is devoured by the goblins in the night.
Yeah. Now, consider the wise merchant who is the Bodhisatta.
Yeah.
He follows weeks later with his own caravan, and he encounters the exact same illusion.
The same muddy wheels, the same wet lotus flowers.
Exactly. And his men actually beg him to throw away their heavy water.
Yeah.
But he refuses to blindly trust the narrative that's being presented to him.
He starts asking basic empirical questions, which I love. He asks his men, have any of you actually felt a rain wind? Have you seen a single rain cloud? Do these red-eyed strangers even cast a shadow?
Which, in the mythology, is the classic tell for a demon. They cast no shadow. But the underlying mechanism here is really the application of the scientific method to a high-stress situation.
Right.
The wise merchant asks why they should throw away the resources they know they have for a completely unverified claim.
It's a perfect mental model for today. I mean, let's call it the Mirage Test, because the goblin is basically the ancient equivalent of a deep fake or, a perfectly fabricated viral post offering an easy out.
That's a great way to look at it.
It looks right, it caters to exactly what you want to hear, but the Mirage Test demands actual empirical proof before you abandon your current position.
And that analytical rigor leads directly into a connected story, the Vantapatha Jataka. Because, critical thinking isn't just about spotting what isn't there. It's about finding what is there, especially when you hit rock bottom.
And literally hitting rock in this game.
Yes, literally. And this story, the wise merchant's caravan gets lost. And they actually do run out of water this time. They are facing certain death.
This is dire.
Very. The crew just throws themselves into their carts in total despair. But the Bodhisatta surveys this arid environment, and he spots a single tuft of kusa grass. And he deduces, based purely on ecological knowledge, that this specific grass can only survive if water is flowing deep underground.
So he makes his exhausted men dig. They dig 60 cubits down, which is this massive, grueling undertaking. But then their spades strike solid rock.
Then the crew simply gives up. They feel like they've reached an impenetrable barrier.
But the merchant, he jumps into the hole, puts his ear to the rock, and he actually hears the faint sound of water flowing beneath it. So he calls down a single, resolute serving lad, hands him an iron sledgehammer, and tells him, if you give in, we all perish. And the lad shatters the rock, unleashing a geyser of water as high as a palm tree.
It's a dual lesson, really, on the absolute necessity of grit.
Yeah.
I mean, the first story warns you against false hope, the wet goblins. But the second story argues that when logic and evidence dictate a resource is there, you cannot stop at the first impenetrable obstacle.
You just have to keep swinging the hammer.
Exactly. Keep swinging.
So we've covered physical survival in the desert, but how do these texts handle the complexities of the marketplace? Because the sources seem to spend a significant amount of time on economics and human value.
Oh, they do. And the shift from survival to commerce is really fascinating. There's the Sarvacha Jataka, which provides this profound study of how value is either created or destroyed in a transaction.
Yeah, this is the story with the decayed, formerly wealthy family, right? It's just an old woman and her granddaughter, and they have this grimy old bowl that they don't even use.
Right.
A greedy hawker comes by, and the granddaughter asks to trade the bowl for a small trinket. The hawker takes a needle, scratches the back of the bowl, and realizes it's actually made of pure gold.
But rather than, offering a fair price and securing the asset, he devises this manipulative strategy.
Right, he gets greedy.
Very. He throws the bowl on the ground, shouts that it's completely worthless, and just walks away. His entire strategy is to convince them it's garbage so he can return later and acquire it for practically nothing.
He's trying to create an artificial vacuum of value. But then the honest hawker, who is our Bodhisatta, comes down the same street. He examines the bowl, realizes it's gold, and just tells them the truth. He says, this is worth 100,000 pieces.
Yeah.
And he gives them all the money and stock he has on him, keeping just 8 coins for his ferry ride home.
And the psychological fallout for the greedy hawker is just visceral. When he returns and discovers the honest man bought it, the text says he is overcome by intense sorrow and rage.
I have to admit, I laughed out loud reading the ancient source material here. The writers really, really leaned into the melodrama.
They absolutely did.
The greedy hawker throws away his own money, chases the honest man down to the river, and the physical description is just wild. It says, blood gushes from his lips and his heart cracks like the mud at the bottom of a tank.
It is incredibly dramatic. But, the theatrics serve a very sharp economic point. Attempting to extract value solely through deception ultimately destroys the deceiver.
Right.
And you can contrast that destruction with the Kulakasehi Jataka, which is basically a masterclass in compounding leverage.
Oh, the mouse merchant story. I love this one. It reads like an ancient blueprint for modern side hustle culture or, those internet challenges where one trades a paperclip all the way up to a house.
That's exactly what it is.
Right.
A wise man points to a dead mouse on the street and remarks that a clever person could build a fortune from it. So poor young man overhears this, picks up the mouse, and sells it at a tavern for cat food, earning a single farthing.
Which is tiny.
Tiny, yes. He finds a microscopic market for an overlooked asset.
Hmm.
But it's what he does with that initial capital that actually matters.
Right, because he doesn't just keep trading up random objects. He buys molasses and water, and he finds these flower gatherers returning from the forest and gives them the refreshments, and in return, they give him a few flowers.
Mm-hmm.
So he sells those, buys more molasses, and repeats the process until he has 8 pennies. Then, a massive storm hits the king's garden, blowing down branches and leaves everywhere.
And the royal gardener is completely overwhelmed. So the young man steps in and offers to clear the garden, provided he can keep all the dead wood. But he doesn't actually do the heavy lifting himself.
Yeah, this is where we really see him utilize leverage. He goes to the local playground, bribes the kids with some molasses, and they drag all the wood to the gate for him.
It's brilliant.
Then a royal potter comes by looking for fuel, buys the wood, and pays him in both cash and a whole set of bowls.
Notice the mechanism here, though. He is constantly finding friction in the market and smoothing it out, and his network is expanding right alongside his capital.
Yeah, it keeps growing. Because next, he sets up a water station and provides free water to 500 grass mowers. And when they ask how they can repay him, he just says, I'll let you know.
Building that social capital.
Exactly. So later, he hears a horse dealer is coming to town with 500 horses. He goes to the mowers and says, give me a bundle of grass each, and please don't sell your grass until mine is sold.
So he successfully creates a localized monopoly. He sells the grass to the horse dealer for 1,000 pieces of money.
And finally, he hears a large cargo ship has arrived in port. He rents a fancy carriage, goes down to the port looking incredibly wealthy, and secures the entire ship's cargo on credit using his signet ring.
Wow.
When the other merchants arrive, they have to pay him a premium just to buy shares in the cargo. So in 4 months, he turns a dead mouse into 200,000 pieces of money.
That is exponential growth.
It is, and the core difference between the hawker whose heart exploded and this young man is their fundamental approach to commerce, right? The greedy hawker tries to extract value from ignorance, but the mouse merchant solves problems at every single step.
Exactly. Feeding the cat, hydrating the workers, clearing the garden. He creates a web of reciprocity.
Yeah, and that reciprocity is the engine of his wealth. So we've looked at surviving external threats in the desert and navigating the mechanics of the marketplace. But the Jatakas also turn their focus inward, don't they? Addressing what happens when the primary threat is our own mind.
They do. Specifically, the psychology of our environment. Long before modern cognitive behavioral therapy was a thing, these texts were exploring how our surroundings literally rewire our neural pathways. The Mahila Mukha illustrates this perfectly with the story of the king's state elephant, named Damselface.
Damselface is a perfectly good, gentle elephant. But a gang of burglars starts meeting near his stall at night, and they sit there discussing how to break into houses, how to be pitiless, how to murder people so there's no resistance. They just hype each other up with this incredibly cruel rhetoric.
And the elephant, who is listening to this night after night, assumes these men are teachers, instructing him on how he is supposed to act. He just absorbs the ambient culture.
And he goes completely mad. The next morning, his keeper walks in, and Damselface dashes him to death on the ground. It's tragic. So the king sends his wise minister, the Bodhisatta again, to diagnose the problem.
And the minister's investigative process is highly systematic. He examines the elephant, finds no physical illness whatsoever, and deduces the issue must be environmental. He interviews the guards, discovers the burglars have been talking near the stall, and realizes the elephant has been conditioned by all this violent rhetoric.
The cure he prescribes is so interesting because it's entirely psychological. He doesn't punish the elephant.
No.
He simply has good men and sages sit by the stall and talk about long-suffering, love, and mercy. The elephant hears this new input, assumes it's his new lesson, and reverts to being perfectly gentle again.
It's a 2,000-year-old warning about the media we consume and, the algorithms we engage with today. Our minds are incredibly permeable. If you immerse yourself in a digital environment of cynicism or outrage, well, that becomes your baseline operating system.
Right.
But if you curate an environment of wisdom and empathy, your mind recalibrates towards that.
Which brings us to the concept of empathy in these texts and how the stories actually push back really hard against the accepted cultural norms of their own time. Like the Mahabharata Jataka tackles the practice of animal sacrifice head on.
Yeah, the feast for the dead. A renowned Brahmin teacher is preparing a feast and orders his students to fetch a goat for sacrifice.
But when the goat realizes what is happening, it does something really jarring. It laughs a loud, joyful laugh, and then it weeps a loud, sorrowful cry.
Which is obviously confusing.
Right, the Brahmin is completely baffled and asks why. And the goat explains that in a past life, he was a Brahmin just like him, who sacrificed a goat for a feast for the dead. And because of that single act, he was condemned to be beheaded in 499 subsequent lives.
And the goat laughs because today is his 500th life and his punishment is finally over.
But he weeps because he looks at the Brahmin and realizes that by killing him today, the Brahmin is about to trigger his own cycle of 500 lives of being beheaded. The goat is weeping out of pity for his own executioner.
It's profound. A tree fairy then actually appears to stop the sacrifice, teaching the crowd that taking life only brings sorrow. It's a radical philosophical reframing for the time. You aren't just harming another creature.
You're harming yourself.
Exactly. You are inflicting a wound on the fabric of existence that will inevitably rebound right back on you.
And this theme of radical empathy reaches its absolute peak in the Nigrod Hamiga Jataka, which is the story of the Banyan deer.
This one is powerful.
So the king of Benares is obsessed with hunting, and he's just terrorizing the local deer populations. To minimize the chaotic daily slaughter, two deer kings, the Banyan deer and the branch deer, agree to a lottery system. One deer will voluntarily go to the execution block each day.
It's a pragmatic, if grim, solution.
Yeah. Right, until the lottery selects a pregnant doe from the branch deer's herd. She pleads with the branch deer to let the turn pass over her until her baby is born. But he refuses, saying he cannot put her burden on another. Desperate, she goes to the Banyan deer, who is our Bodhisatta.
And the Banyan deer's response is really the crux of the whole story. He tells her to go in peace, he doesn't draw another lot, and he doesn't pass the burden to a subordinate. He just walks directly to the king's kitchen himself and lays his own head on the execution block.
Okay, let me push back on this for a second, just playing devil's advocate here. From a pure leadership standpoint, isn't that incredibly reckless? I mean, the Banyan deer is the king. By putting his head on the block for one pregnant doe, he is leaving his entire herd leaderless and vulnerable. Is that actually a sound strategy?
You know, that is a very fair challenge. If you view leadership solely as resource management or, strategic preservation, it looks totally foolish.
Yeah.
But the text is arguing a different philosophical stance altogether. It's arguing for ultimate responsibility. The premise is that a true leader cannot outsource the suffering of the most vulnerable members of their community. He must take the burden entirely upon himself, even at the cost of his own life.
And the human king's reaction really bears out the power of that philosophy. The king had previously granted the two golden deer kings immunity. So when he sees the Banyan deer on the block and hears why he is there, he is absolutely floored. He says, "Even among men, I have never seen such abounding charity, love, and pity."
It completely shatters the human king's ego-driven worldview.
He is so moved that he spares the Banyan deer and the pregnant doe. But the Banyan deer doesn't just say thanks and leave. He negotiates. He secures immunity for his herd, then all deer, then all four-footed creatures, then all birds, and finally all fish.
He leverages his radical act of self-sacrifice to force a massive expansion of the moral circle.
It's incredible. Let's synthesize this journey we've been on. We started looking at these 3rd century BC texts, expecting, ancient mythology, and we found a highly applicable operating manual for modern life.
We really did. We learned to deploy the Mirage Test against superficial evidence and false hope in the desert, while finding the grit to swing the sledgehammer when logic tells us the water is actually there.
We saw the self-destruction of the hawker trying to extract value through deception, contrasted with the compounding magic of the mouse merchant who relentlessly solved problems and created reciprocity.
And we explored the urgent necessity of guarding our mental environment from toxic influences, alongside the challenge of practicing radical empathy and ultimate responsibility in our leadership.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this deep dive right now? I want to leave you with a final provocative thought directly inspired by the core premise of these sources. In these texts, because of the concept of reincarnation, every single character, the wise minister, the struggling lad with the hammer, the golden deer, the goat, even the water goblin, was someone who had lived before and would live again.
They're all deeply interconnected actors across time.
So ponder this. If you walked into your life tomorrow acting as if every person you interact with, every animal you see, and every passing stranger was actually a recurring character in your own epic storyline,
Hmm.
perhaps even a teacher in disguise, how would that shift the way you listen? How would it change your patience, your reactions, and the way you value the world around you? Because if you adopt that lens, then that ancient business manual and survival guide isn't just history. It's your operating manual for tomorrow morning.